May 30th, 2019 Pennsylvania Board of Pardons public hearing is now in session. The Honorable John Fetterman, Lieutenant Governor, presiding.
Please be seated. Before I formally call this session into order, I want to check with Secretary Flood. Is there any old business?
Yes, Governor. There was a case scheduled yesterday afternoon where there was a discrepancy on the part of the applicant in terms of when he was supposed to appear. The applicant's name is William J. Sinceri. He has appeared today, and if you permit, we'd like to consider his application before we move forward with this afternoon's session.
As a special consideration, given there was an honest misunderstanding on the petitioner's part, we're willing to entertain that at this moment to handle this case before we begin the main proceedings of this afternoon. Would he please come to the...
Sinceri.
Mr. Sinceri, in the interest of time and in the special circumstances and the relative nature of your charges and the amount of time since the charges, asking you to cede your time to the board so we may ask you questions regarding specifically your petition.
So thank you for hearing my case.
I need an open and
No questions. No questions.
All right, well, at this time, is the board prepared to take a vote?
Yes, we are.
All right. Ms. Greason?
Yes.
Mr. Williams? Dr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Rubinek?
Yes.
General Shapiro? Governor?
Yes.
Application recommended.
Godspeed. I call to order this session of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons. Before I explain the proceedings to our applicants and guests, I would like to introduce the other members of this board. Seated on my immediate right is Attorney General Josh Shapiro. Seated on my immediate left is Harris Rubinek, the board's correction expert. Seated on my far right is John Williams, the board psychiatrist. And seated on my far left is Marcia Grayson, the board's victim representative. This session is being recorded, so participants should speak clearly and loud enough to be heard, and we ask that cell phones be turned off. Today's session will likely end around 2:30. If you don't have an agenda and you would like one, they are available in the entrance of the room. We will first take up under agenda item 2, what are termed calendar. Wrong script. Today, are these calendar? These are considered calendar?
I would defer to, yes.
Calendar cases, excuse me then. Today there are 6 calendar cases. A maximum of 30 minutes will be allowed the applicant and others to present the case in support of the application. And a maximum of 30 minutes will be allowed to those who stand in opposition to the application. The full allotment of time will be used only if it is needed. Any speaker in opposition to an application should check in with the secretary. Unless you have done so already, you should do that and you'll be recognized at the appropriate time. The secretary is the timekeeper and will alert you when your time is up. The outcome of the calendar case will be announced by the secretary after the vote on each case. There are 3 possible outcomes. Application recommended, which means that we are recommending to Governor Wolf that clemency be granted to an applicant. Application denied, which means that a recommendation for clemency will not be granted at this time. And 3, the board could vote to hold an application under advisement. This is similar to a continuance and can be done for various reasons if the board is not prepared to vote on a case. I will stress the ultimate decision to accept or reject the recommendation of the board is solely at the discretion of the governor. In addition, the governor is not required to act on a recommendation within a specific period of time. While in this courtroom, please conduct yourselves in a respectful manner. With that said, I will call the first calendar case to be heard by the board today. Would those representing Robert Weidman please come to the front of the room? Please be advised that we had a very productive conversation with your client last evening, and a lot of the important information is out. Who do you have here to speak on his?
I have his former prosecutor, Judge Jeffrey Manning, and I have Professor Conti from Duquesne University, who can describe his role in working with him in a prison police program called Inside Out. And you already have a letter from his sister, so to save time, I'm going to do that.
I believe I speak for the board when we would be most anxious to hear from Judge Manning.
All right, then let's do this, but let me just give you a little bit of context, and I've got way back.
I would actually, the board would actually like to hear from Judge Manning.
Okay, fine. I'm Mark Schwartz. I represent Robert Weidman, and I'd like to call Judge Manning. Could you please state your name?
Good afternoon, General and Governor and members of the board. Thank you. I'm Jeffrey A. Manning.
And let me make it clear that I'm not, one, this isn't a judicial proceeding, and two, I'm not calling you as a character witness. Do you understand that?
I do understand that.
Okay. Can you tell me what your current position is?
I'm presently a judge of the Court of Common Pleas in Allegheny County, and have been so for the last 31 years.
Were you ever president judge of the Court of Allegheny County?
I've served a full term as unanimously elected president judge.
Counselor, I believe that the board would like the opportunity to question Judge Manning with respect to his support of your client today.
That's fine. If you want to go first, and then you'll probably cover my questions, that's fine. I really want to focus on his concern as the prosecutor. The prosecutor did 3 people in 3 separate trials with 3 different results.
Judge Manning, welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come spend some time with us today. We would like to open it up to specific questions from our board regarding your support for Mr. Weidman. Are you okay with this?
I certainly am.
Ms. Grayson?
Good afternoon, Judge Manning.
Good afternoon.
I don't have any questions for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Judge. I guess the question is more generic. Obviously, you've made the trip to come here to support this case. Could you just describe why?
Well, I am perhaps not only supporting this case, but I do so because I believe there are many cases similarly situated which ought to also have the same consideration given to them. I can begin with my beginning of how I'm involved with this case, if you wish.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think is significant for us?
This case came to me as a young assistant district attorney. I think it was 40 years ago, may have been more. There were 3 defendants. They were involved in a set up an armed robbery. Basically, the 3 defendants told the buyers of illegal televisions at the time, or rather stolen televisions, that they had these products and they were willing to sell them for $80 a piece. Surprisingly or not, in 1977, a stolen television was worth $800 at the time. The price has gone down for us, I suppose. But the bottom line was that's how they used to set it up. On the day of the event, Weidman and Dukes and Rice, those were the 3 participants, Michael Dukes and Robert Weidman, as I referred to, and Cecil Rice. They showed up, they opened the back of the truck. Cecil Rice was standing there with a firearm. Mr. Marino, the deceased, turned and ran, and Mr. Weidman said, "Stop him," and Michael Dukes chose to shoot him in the back, and therefore he died as a result of his injuries. They were apprehended by, Mr. Rice was apprehended first. He was still local when he was apprehended. He went to trial. In those days, everyone was entitled to an individual trial in a homicide case. He was the younger of the three. He was actually still in high school, I believe, at the time. Anyway, he was convicted of third-degree murder and robbery rather than felony murder, and was sentenced ultimately by Judge Clark to 20 to 40 years in prison. He was paroled sometime in the early 90s, so I ran into him on the street, not even knowing he had been paroled. Mr. Wyden and Mr. Dukes were both convicted separately and were found guilty of murder murder of the second degree, which is felony murder. That's where I perceive to be the problem, because there are varying different attitudes about people who commit crimes and what they do. In this case, there was a divergence between what I saw to be the facts and what the ultimate result of the jury's sentencing and the sentencing became. And accordingly, I've taken the position for a long time that the felony murder rule does not apply as we would expect it to apply. It eliminates the court's ability to properly sentence. And I take a little note here that I wrote down to give you the opportunity to understand that when we proceed to sentencing in serious cases, there are a number of things that we consider. The nature of the crime, the pre-sentence report, which we would not have in a felony murder case, the victim's impact statements, the arguments of counsel, and the allocution of the defendant. All these things go by the board with a felony murder conviction, because it is felony murder, the only crime other than murder of the first degree wherein Pennsylvania imposes a sentence of life without parole. And I've been in the opinion for many years that it is unjust and it works hardship in both our prison system, but with the whole concept of justice and what it should be. And the courts should have more opportunity to do as they would think is proper, and therefore give the defendant, which is required by law, the full panoply of being able to say everything about himself, and the court to consider all the matters that are necessary in a good sentence. Any general?
Is that the end of your question?
Yeah.
Judge, thank you for appearing today. I think it is highly significant that you're here, and I want to echo the comments of the Lieutenant Governor that we appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule. I mean that quite sincerely. In fact, I can only recall one other time where a sitting judge like you, who was a former prosecutor in a case, appeared before us to try to right a wrong, if you will. There was a judge here in Dauphin County, Timmy Broch's case. I guess my question to you would be, I hear you loud and clear on your concerns about murder too in general. I share those concerns, and I hope the legislature acts promptly to reform the laws in that area. But I want to just ask you pointedly, are you here because of the facts of this case in particular, or because of your concerns writ large on the murder two statute?
I'm here. I start off with the facts of this case because this is apparently a case which drew some attention. But the bottom line is, over the years, I have confronted the same issue with felony murder, and I continue to feel that it is not proper, it is not properly disposed of the way it should be in our court system, and that is because we're otherwise handicapped by the legislature or by the law.
I appreciate your comments. I hope that the legislature is listening to those comments. Just one final question. Again, as the Lieutenant Governor indicated, we had a very long session last evening in the prison to discuss this case. There was a lot of discussion involving a subsequent medical malpractice case, which seemed to create some question as to the cause of death, that it was not the shooting, but rather some other event that transpired involving the physicians and the care.
The claim of medical malpractice apparently occurred after he was shot and taken to one hospital and transferred to the medical care.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you had any thoughts you wanted to share on that piece.
I was aware of it when it was brought up, and I didn't know what the date that was. I was actually sitting as a witness and called for some minor things. My opinion, as being a prosecutor, and you certainly know as being a prosecutor as well, when you evaluate the evidence, I did not think that that was worthy of a new trial, which is what he was trying to do at that point in time, and said that that was the issue. I saw the felony murder issue as a greater issue. Again, that was my discretion exercise, and I did some time. I felt it was not worth it.
Thank you. Again, Your Honor, commend you for appearing today, and thank you for your time.
No questions.
Once again, echoing General Shapiro's comments on our gratitude for you making the trip and taking the time, you clearly support clemency for Mr. Wagner.
I do. It's 40-some years he's been in prison, and I would.
Enough is enough, in other words.
Yes, sir. I have no reason to believe he is not supporting himself properly, and I was never told that by anyone else. And I'm not in that position, but I think it's beyond the pale of what we should do in criminal justice, is to hold someone for that period of time, without some major significant event other than what he was originally convicted.
Judge, we're grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to call briefly.
Counselor, speaking for the board, I think we've been satisfied with our understanding of the case in the specifics.
All right, fine, let me just add two things. One, you have the letter of his sister who says that she is retired along with her husband, and they'll welcome him to their home. Two, you have 2 vans worth of people who are academics, criminal justice experts, policemen, who are ready to welcome him back into the community. 3, I just want to add a personal note before mentioning Norman Conley. I first entered this building 50 years ago as a page for Lee Rose. He entrusted this case to me as a young lawyer, and we realized that it was too early to be before the pardon board in 1984. But now is the time. If you want, I'd like to examine Mr. Conti on what he has in mind for Mr. Weidman. There's a job there, and what the inside-out program is vis-a-vis prisoners, students, and policemen. But I understand the time that you've spent, and I appreciate it.
We believe we are adequately briefed on your client. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the attention you've shown.
Thank you very much. Secretary Flood.
Any opposition to the applicant?
Those in opposition?
Good afternoon. I'm Nikki Moreno's sister, Christine. If you have children yourself, you know that every parent's dream is for their child to be successful. My parents were extremely proud of their son, Nicky, who at the young age of 23 had saved enough money by working at a car lot to buy his own used car lot. Unlike Robert Weidman, who at the same age, to support his drug habit, sold drugs, robbed gas stations, and used car lot dealers. As stated in Brothers and Keepers by John Edgar Weidman, he didn't feel bad about robbing them white coats. They were crooks themselves. Is there any rehabilitation or reform for that way of thinking? I was only 12 years old when my brother Nicky was killed. As you already know, Nicky was 24. Because of our age difference, I never had the opportunity to become his friend, not just his little sister. That opportunity was stolen from me when Robert Weidman yelled "Get him" to an armed man as my brother Nicky was running away. Not only was that stolen from me, but having my freedom during my teenage years was also stolen from me. After Nicky was killed, my mother became extremely overprotective of me. I couldn't go anywhere without her insisting on driving me and picking me up. She was so afraid that I was going to be shot and killed. I absolutely hated her for being that way, until I had children of my own. And then it was then that I realized how much it would hurt me if I were to lose a child. I honestly don't know how my mother was able to live with that extreme pain all those years. And it was all because Robert Wyden yelled, "Get him," to an armed man as her son Nicky was running away. Nicky's fiance, his girlfriend of 10 years, had a supervisor job at Bell Telephone and then AT&T. She just couldn't bear the pain of losing the love of her life. She turned to drugs and alcohol. She lost her good job, and she eventually lost her life. All because Robert Wyden yelled, "Get him," to an armed man as Nicky was, the love of her life, was running away. Robert Wyden has had the opportunity to visit with, talk to, and write to his nieces and nephews. My children, my nieces and nephews, have never even had the opportunity to meet their Uncle Nicky. They're only able to hear our memories of him, see pictures of him, and visit his grave. It's all because Robert Wyden yelled, "Get him," to an armed man as their Uncle Nicky was running away. November 15, 1975 will forever seem like yesterday to me. The dreadful day that my brother Nicky was killed, the shock, the tears, the funeral, the detectives. And after the men who killed him were apprehended hundreds of miles away, the threatening phone calls my parents received, stating that if they valued their son-in-law's and family's lives, they all not to testify. The trials and then more tears. My family will forever be serving a life sentence of mourning my brother's death. We will never be paroled from the pain of losing my brother at such a young age. Robert Wyden approached Nicky. Nicky didn't go looking for him. Robert Wyden yelled, "Get him," to an armed man as Nicky was running away, which caused my brother Nicky to be sentenced to death. Robert Wyden should remain sentenced to life with no parole. Thank you.
Thank you. Very sorry for your loss. Thank you.
Any other expressions of opposition to this applicant? Please come forth.
Okay. The chair now recognizes counsel for Cynthia Gonzalez.
Hi, my name is Shelley Watson, I'm on behalf of the Department of Corrections. Speaking on behalf of Ms. Gonzalez, our daughter, Michelle, and the mother, Irene, and there are no particular questions the board has.
After conferring with the board, we believe the most appropriate course of action today is to take Ms. Gonzalez's case under advisement and defer. Secretary Flood?
Yes, so, we're going to call it as a motion.
Yes.
And before we do that, is there, I guess, any expression before we call that motion?
If they wish, but I just want them to understand that we won't be taking a formal vote today on her case. So.
All right, that said, on the motion to hold the case of Cynthia M. Gonzalez under advisement, Ms. Grayson,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Grubernet,
Yes.
General Shapiro,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
Now, on the question itself, Ms. Grayson,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Grubernet,
Yes.
General Shapiro, Governor.
Yes.
Application held over for advisement.
Would the council representing Naomi Blunt come to the
Once again, Shelley Watson on behalf of the Department of Corrections. Speaking today on the woman's behalf is her son Edward, her granddaughter Mommy, and Ellen Macchiando of the Pennsylvania Prison Society. They're all available to take over questions for us.
I believe I speak for the board that we spent an incredibly informative period of time with Ms. Blunt last night, and we believe that we have a great deal of information from which to base our decision on. We understand that you all here are in support of her clemency, correct? Does anyone have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Mr. Bieber?
I do not.
Gentlemen?
No questions, but I appreciate very much you being here too.
Doctor?
No questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any expressions of opposition to the applicant? Step forth.
No
Hearing none.
expressions of opposition? Okay. The next case calling the representatives for Daniel Cummins.
Good afternoon, honorable board members. I'm Christy Cobb, representing Mr. Cummings. You heard from him last evening. Do you need any further information?
No, we have decided as a board that the case of Mr. Cummings would be most appropriate to be held over for advisement. Secretary Flood.
And for the sake of the public record, motion is being put forth to hold the case of Daniel Cummings under advisement.
Second.
All right. On the motion itself, Ms. Grayson,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Gubernet,
Yes.
General Shapiro,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
On the question, Ms. Grayson,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Gubernet,
Yes.
General Shapiro,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
Motion carries, and on the question itself, application will be held over for advisement. Wait, you can move on to the next case, Governor.
The chair calls the representatives of Ernest Potts to the floor.
Good afternoon, honorable board. My name is Jay Johnson. I'm representing applicant Ernest Potts.
We as a board, as you know, who were present, we spent a considerable amount of time and believe that we were able to, we found hearing from him directly very helpful in explaining his case and his circumstances surrounding it. At this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to the board if there are any questions of his supporters specifically.
I do not have any questions, thank you.
I do have questions. Thank you.
General?
I have no questions. We may have a question for the victim advocate.
No questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any expressions of opposition to the applicant, please step forth. Office of Victim Advocate as well.
Is there anyone present from the Office of the Victim Advocate? Have you received any opposition or support to this application?
Regarding Mr. Ernest Potts, we did receive comment. Mary Bowley is the only surviving family member, and she's in support of the applicant.
Is there anyone to speak in opposition? At this point, the chair calls the representation of Andre Wright to the floor.
I'm looking for Mr. Adil Wright, Mr. Blackburn, Dr. Betts, Mr. Thomas Turner, and Mr. Jones. Honorable Board, I'm Christy Callier representing Dr. Wright. We heard from him last evening. Do you need any additional information?
Would you be kind enough to introduce the individuals?
Certainly. Present here to support applicant Wright is his son, Mr. Adil Wright, Mr. Stephen Blackburn, a previously commuted lifer, Dr. Joseph Betts, his mentor, friend, and supporter, Mr. Thomas Turner, and his cousin, Kim Jones, who can be a home provider. Would you like to hear from any of them?
Ms. Gracie, next question.
Thank you. Mr. Turner? Could you please come to the mic? Thank you, sir. Mr. Turner, how long have you known Mr. Wright?
49 years.
49 years? So would it be safe to say that you knew him in his early years as a juvenile?
Yes.
He has, you are aware that he has an extensive record, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me what, if any, difference you know of the juvenile Mr. Wright to the person that you know of Mr. Wright as he is today?
Well, I've seen him develop into a man because then we all were wild but from knowing him now, I see a much better human being, more sensible, more reliable, more spiritual. All of the things I see is a big difference. When we first met many years ago, we were just friends, but now I consider him as a brother because he has been through a lot, and so have I. And he has supported me in a lot of the ups and downs in life. So even I see, and I know now that he's real remorse for what happened, that tragic day.
As far as his attitude or behavior regarding getting frustrated or angry, have you had an opportunity to speak with him regarding his thinking? I know you said his thinking has changed, but specifically looking at how he handles anger and frustration, what, if anything, do you see that's different?
Always a much calmer, because when we're young, we're wild. Yes, we are. And as we grow older, we begin to settle down and look at things in a broader thing. He's more mature. He's more sense. I mean, like we go from a young wildness to, as age comes upon us, we begin to think and move in a different manner. And he is more calm, he's more sensible, and reasonable. We begin to logic things, situations where we would just jump. We begin to really sit back, stand back, and look at it, the whole picture, to where we can begin to understand it's not worth it.
My last question, in general and regarding in that same vein, would have to do with within the last 10 years. Can you think of a time that would have been upsetting to him and how he responded during that time? Could you just give us an example?
Well, when his mother passed on, let's be honest and for real, that's like something snatched from him. And he went through an emotional thing, but inside, it wasn't nothing acted out at nobody or anything. So, I say he had changed considerably. Yes.
Thank you. I don't have any additional questions.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question of the Department of Corrections, if I may. We did have a good conversation with Mr. Wright last night. One of the issues that came up were his, what I would consider a significant number of misconducts. Well, there was 26 misconducts, including the most recent one in 2013. I guess my question is, before something is listed as a misconduct and represented as such to this board, has there been a process, an adjudication process, something that has determined what really transpired and whether or not it should be misconduct? And are there instances where things are raised where it seems maybe initially to be misconduct, but after review, things are taken off and they're not considered misconduct?
Yes, sir, there is a hearing process, and he was found guilty. There were actually 3 items that came up on the 2013 misconduct. Of those, only 1 was found guilty, the other 2 were dismissed, and there is due process provided for misconducts. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I don't know if in the course of you introducing the individuals, if I missed it, is there someone representative of the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office who's with us today, who's able to answer questions?
The Philadelphia DA's office is here. Philadelphia DA's office?
I don't want to put them on the spot.
There's several of us here, and we're happy to answer any questions.
I was moved by a letter that I received, that the board received from Patricia Cummings. I don't know if Patricia Cummings
is here.
I'm Patricia Cummings.
Would you be willing to try to answer your question? Feel free to come on up here.
Certainly.
If I may, Sarah Boyette is my colleague, and I'd like her to be present with me. We both work on the case together.
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me just state at the outset that I find the materials that you submit to be comprehensive and quite helpful in the process. And I've noticed a marked change in the process, and so I just want to say thank you for that information. Whether we agree or disagree on the end result, I think the information is really helpful. In my questioning of Judge Manning, I raised issues involving murder too, as he did as well, that I think we all feel, many of us feel, is in need of significant reform. I think you'd agree in looking at second to the final paragraph on page 2 of your letter, this is probably not the typical murder 2 case, right? The shooter with the other individual in the getaway car. In this case, we had 3 individuals, and again, I realize you're relying on the record, you were not there. But we have 3 individuals who were convicted of murder 2. None of them were proven to be the shooter, none of them were proven not to be the shooter. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe expand upon that analysis that you did and offer any further thoughts that might not be within the framework of that paragraph.
Certainly, if I may.
what I'll do is I'll take it at the beginning and then I'll let Sarah join in because we went round and round with some of the questions that you're asking, to be quite frank with you. A pretty extensive review of the record, and we both felt very comfortable with saying that we did not believe that he was the shooter. One of the issues that we had was whether or not he was actually present in the room when the shooting occurred. The evidence at trial was pretty conflicting about that, and I have to say we kind of went back and forth with the letter because we were really torn as to how much information did we actually need to include in the letter regarding the conflicting testimony from the various witnesses.
Right, as I recall, there was one witness who placed him in the room and another witness who did not place him in the room. Am I remembering this correctly?
That is correct, yeah. Right. That's what I have to add. I do think, as you said, kind of the preface to this, I think that there are real serious concerns that I think most of us in this room have regarding second degree. But individually, and I know you asked this of the judge in the previous case, individually, I think the way Ms. Boyette and I were both looking at this is it's not just a question of that, it's a question of the individual facts of the case as well as the record, I think, that exists in regard to the length of incarceration and how he's done. And certainly, if it pleases the diocese, I will turn it over to Ms. Boyette and see if she can kind of hit the question a little closer in terms of what I think you're asking in regard to the other two individuals that were involved.
Yeah, I respect your opinion and District Attorney Krasner's opinion on what you hope to come from this case. I'm really not driving at that. It was more, I thought that the facts of this case were not a traditional murder two case of the shooter and getaway driver, just as the obvious example. But I didn't know if there was any additional information as to that moment in time and the conflicting testimony that went beyond what is contained in this paragraph that you thought would be helpful for us to know. Not anything to opine on a broader case, just those facts.
Sure. So there were two eyewitnesses, the two other victims of the robbery homicide. They testified divergently at trial. One of them testified that Mr. Wright was in the living room with them when the victim was shot, and that the other two defendants were the ones in the kitchen with him. And the other testified that initially it was the other two defendants that were in the kitchen with the victim, but then that Mr. Wright joined them and that he was also in the kitchen at the time.
And you would presume, again, both of you were way too young to have been there at the time, but you would presume then that that's why all three were charged under murder too, as opposed to...
The trial prosecutor explicitly touched on this in his summation in the notes of testimony that I read, where he basically acknowledged that the two diverged, but because they were all charged with murder in the second degree, it wasn't necessary for the jury to figure out who had actually done the shooting.
Thank you for coming up. Sorry for dragging your seats.
Thank you very much.
Before you depart, Dr. Williams, do you have any questions? Actually, I do. To what degree of confidence are you that he was not the shooter?
I would say extremely confident, and I don't know if you're wanting a numerical.
Well, of course, but specifically, extremely confident that he was not the shooter.
I feel extremely confident. I think Ms. Boyette does too, but I will let her speak. I think she might be a little more cautious than I am in regard to that.
I feel that I don't have evidence to say that he was one of the two shooters. I don't think that the prosecution proved that, and I wouldn't feel comfortable ever stating that he was one of the two shooters, which is not exactly your question, but it's...
And in your opinion, how long is enough? He's been in jail for 40 years. How long is enough?
I think I can answer for both of us because this is something that we talk about regularly. At this point, and I think you all know, we're fairly new to this process, and we are trying very hard to take an individualized look at these cases and make our recommendations based on the individual facts of the case, the individual, and also science. And one of the things, as I said, that we talk about repeatedly is how much is enough. And I don't think that we have an absolute number, but depending on the individual facts of the cases, we're kind of looking at, when somebody hits about 30 years, we start getting pretty close there.
In your professional opinions, would you stand in favor of clemency?
Yes.
I have a question of the Department of Corrections. Mr. Wright received, for that disciplinary action that General Shapiro referenced, 90 days.
Yes, sir.
That sounds serious? Is that typical? Is that considered a slap on the wrist? Like on the scale of severity, where would that fall specifically?
I believe that was commensurate for the charge of, it was defined as assault. I believe that is commensurate for that, sir.
Do you know if the guard that was assaulted required any medical attention or any injury?
That I don't know, sir. It's my understanding that her finger was hurt. That is all that I know beyond that.
Her little finger?
I believe it was.
Okay. Any other questions from the board for any of the? I have one question. You're Mr. Wright's son. How old were you when he went into prison?
2 years old.
How old are you now? 31. Are there any other questions?
If I may reiterate something from Secretary Wetzel, he does recommend this application for commutation to the board based on the age of Mr. Wright at the time of the offense of the crime. He was 20 years old, and he was not the trigger man, although he did have a gun. Secretary Wetzel notes that he earned his college degrees while incarcerated and has been misconduct-free for the last 5 years. And we appreciate your consideration of his application.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any expressions of opposition to this applicant? Please step forth.
Any of those in that opposition, please come to the front. The board now stands in recess.
All rise.
Please be seated. Secretary, is there anyone need to be called again?
No, Governor.
All right. Ready for votes?
All right. On the question of Robert Weidman, Ms. Grayson,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Gubernick,
Yes.
General Shapiro,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes.
application recommended. As you remember, case number 2 we held under advisement. Case number 3, Naomi Blunt, Ms. Grayson,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Gubernick,
Yes.
General Shapiro,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
As you remember, case number 4 was held over for advisement. Moving on to case number 5, Ernest Potts, Ms. Grayson,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Gubernick,
Yes.
General Shapiro,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
Application recommended. Moving on to case number 6, Andre Wright.
If it pleases the governor, I would like to make a motion to hold this case under advisement.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the question, on the motion to hold the application of Mr. Andre Wright under advisement, Ms. Grayson,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Gubernick,
Yes.
General Shapiro.
Yes.
On the question, Ms. Grayson,
Yes.
Dr. Williams, Mr. Gubernick,
Yes.
General Shapiro.
Yes.
All right, motion is so moved, and this case is held under advisement. Governor, that is all that I have relative to the votes for this afternoon.
Secretary Flood, let the record show that I too support both motions.
All right. Duly noted.
Thank you. Finally, again, the governor has the final decision to accept or reject the board's recommendation, and he is not required to act within a specific period of time. Please update the Board of Pardons Office if your address changes before you receive notification of the governor's action. If your application was not recommended to the governor today, this board's regulations permit you to file another application, but not until 12 months from today's adverse decision. If you receive 2 or more consecutive adverse decisions, you must wait 24 months. An applicant may request the board to reconsider its decision not to recommend an application to the governor. According to the board's regulations, the applicant must show a change in circumstances since the application was filed or other compelling reasons to justify the reconsideration. Dissatisfaction with the decision is not grounds to request reconsideration. Please call the Board of Pardons if you have a question about the status of a recommendation, filing another application, or a request for reconsideration. Board is now in recess.
Congratulations. Thank you. Hallelujah. Thank you. Mom.